Hi folks, old man Grognard here. Had a show tonight, small crowd, but it wasn't bad. We got 2 more weekends of this and then I'm off the hook. And I wanted to shout out my friend Jeff Tarnelin. Thanks for adding me. I appreciate it. You do some good work, man. Hope to review a few things of yours in the future. And of course, second edition of Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. Did I say sorcerers again? I meant sorcerers. Sometimes I think it's the teeth. But after I get out, after the last bow's taken, after the curtain comes down or the lights go out, I go into my car and I start thinking about those mean fantasy streets. You know the ones I'm talking about. Beggars on the side, who knows what being sold in the alley, and who knows what being killed. Whatever's in the sewer, you hope it stays there. The inns, the taverns, the pleasure houses, all part of those mean streets. And that's the way the city goes in a D&D game. So, we have one email here, which got me thinking, which is why I sort of wax poetic for a bit. It's from Alexander Winters, and it's titled Urban Campaigns. Dear Old Man Grognard, DM Alex again. Hey, Alex. Loving the new After Dark segments. Thank you. Thank you for addressing my emails. Really appreciate it. I'm gearing up for a large urban campaign and have been making use of some good supplements. Vornheim, City State of the Invincible Overlord, and FR1. I would love to know if you ever ran a large urban campaign or session and what advice you could expect. Thanks again, DM Alex. Well, Alex, I don't have much experience running urban campaigns, but you caught me at just the right time. It's on hiatus right now, but my Castles and Crusades campaign is turning into that. After the characters went from the Ghoul Tower to the Keep in the Borderlands, to something that I wrote, to the Isle of Dread, they are back in Bluffside now. And they are getting involved with a Temple of Odin that needs to get some stuff done. They're trying to put on a show with the local theater, and there are certain forces that are trying to stop them. And they don't know why. And I left it up in the air because I had a show to do. Things happened. We lost a member of our group, sadly. Another part of our group right now is in the hospital. So I'm hoping to get back to this in maybe a few weeks or a month. But right now they're in the middle of an urban campaign. It's turned into that. It may turn into something else. Now, I would recommend you get Bluffside for Castles and Crusades. You didn't mention what system you're using, but they have a D20 version of Castles and Crusades, which I found out they still sell in PDF. Or you can go to the Troll Lord Games site and get Castles and Crusades hardback, which I recommend. They also sell that in PDF too. It's a great city, and it's got more bang for your buck than you wouldn't believe. You could probably use Overlord stuff and Vornheim stuff in there. You can do a mishmash, however you want to do it. It just seems that when you do an urban campaign, some people think it makes it too easy on the characters because they can always refresh and regroup. Well, that's not quite true. They can get in enough trouble and even more in an urban campaign. And a lot of it is behind the scenes, if you want to go that route. But there's also behind the scenes stuff. You know what I always recommend? There's some people who say, "Oh, I don't want to have to go out in the wilderness all the time to get them in a dungeon or something like that. They're in the city right now. Why don't we do that?" But I have a city campaign, but they missed the dungeon. Simple. Send them down the sewers. It's the same, pretty much the same thing. You don't know what you're going to find down there. One reason I recommend Bluffside is because of the fact that they don't have to go to ruins to get in like dungeon-esque trouble. They're already there. There's one section of the city that is just ruins from another civilization. And people are always going there looking for stuff. Archaeologists, adventurers, what have you. And they are always, looking for people to go in there. So I would go with that. But that gives you also an example of wilderness in an urban setting. I don't really get into the intrigue stuff, but most fantasy cities have enough things like back alleyways and dead ends and things like that that give them enough, adventuring possibilities for that kind of thing. Now, I don't know if you're running high magic, low magic, or whatever magic, but even then, you can do something about it. Because if it's, magic is forbidden or it's for low magic or something like that, it just has to happen not in public view. Assassinations, kidnappings, things like that. When they were heading for the Isle of Dread, they were in the city of Sordidon, which is right outside of Bluffside. It's kind of a floating city right there. And a ship rights, because they needed a ship to get to the Isle of Dread to rescue their friend. They ended up sleeping overnight at the shop because the owners were being shaken down by this local gang of roughs. There's a couple of humans, a half-orc, and a Dragori, which is a kind of a dragon/lizard man. And they were being shaken down. And they wanted them there. They said, "We'll have the ship for you ready to go in the morning. If you could stay there, we'd appreciate it because we need the protection." They got in a fight right there in the shipyard. Oh, also they had a hill giant to deal with too, which got there too. So once again, it's an urban setting, but still, they found the trouble. I would recommend something I've already reviewed on my other series. The two books, the D30 DM Companion and the D30 Sandbox Companion, especially this one, because this gives you towns and things you can create on the fly, even cities and ruins. So, to me, I'm always like, bring the wilderness to them. If they're in the city and they're not in the wilderness, you can bring it to them. Or have enough things going on in the city where it doesn't really matter. The only advantage is they have places like an inn or something where they can regroup. Every party needs a place where they can regroup, whether it's out in the wilderness or in a city or in a dungeon or whatever. They're always looking for that. Like I said, they have the advantage of being in a city so they can resupply. High holy days and festivals are great for stuff like this because you don't know what the hell's going on, and a lot of time people think, "Oh, it's part of the show," that kind of thing. Jousts, how about that? And the usual backstabbing and, like I said, assassination attempts. They could be approached by a cult to do some bidding, maybe help them kidnap. My favorite plot point is mistaken identity. I get a lot of mileage out of that. I don't pull it out all the time, otherwise the players are going, "Oh, this again? Great." But I love mistaken identity. I've done it twice in 2 different campaigns, and both times it's great. It's usually the player character who looks like somebody else The somebody else is usually some evil guy or some bandit or criminal or something. First time it happened, I was playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, first edition. I was running it, and my roommate's PC player character, he was mistaken for the head of this cult who wanted them to do some grave robbing. Grave robbing's great in the city too. You know, that's another thing. I've ridden. I ran at North Texas a couple of years ago a basic game in a small town that basically wasn't a small town, and there was grave robbing, there was dungeon delving, there was all sorts of stuff. They got attacked by players. There were zombies and ghouls attacking the livestock of the herd they just brought in because they were in a cattle drive, and that was the end of it. And all of a sudden, these ghouls and zombies start showing up and attacking the cattle. They had to fight that. That was fun. So there's plenty of things to do in a town. Just try and think about what you want them to do and what would happen. Say, take a typical dungeon scenario, and think about what would happen if you put it in the city. How you would change it, what would happen, how would they go about it? Because I'm sure there's a lot of there's a lot of similar things that you could do in a city that you could do. If you want to think of the dungeon city as one big dungeon, that would work too. You know, it's just a very well populated dungeon with other people and shops and things. So that's my 2 cents on the whole thing, really. I kind of like urban settings. I like wilderness and urban settings. I do like dungeons, but I always think that's, dungeons are kind of passé. I mean, you can do yes, I'm not saying you can't do a really good dungeon, but I just think that they're overused. That's why I like to have a dungeon that serves a purpose. And if I can do the same thing in the wilderness or in a city, I will do it. And also, my dungeons tend to be small, like maybe 12 to 15 rooms. Because the mega dungeons are nice, mega dungeons are fine, but you have to have a purpose for being in a mega dungeon. And there are good, you can pull it off, but I would rather have a smaller dungeon, and it usually is part of the plot. Why they have to go down there. But I'm getting off this. Well, I hope I answered your question, Alex. And thanks for writing me. But I'm kind of going off on a tangent right now, which I think I will follow for a few minutes here. To me, dungeons need a purpose. You keep running dungeons without a purpose, and all you have is a real imaginative and off-the-cuff board game, as far as I'm concerned. Kill monsters, take their stuff. Kill monsters, take their stuff. Now, you got to have a premise and why this is here. Dungeons are not natural. Caves and caverns, yeah, okay, fine. I can understand people adapting it, but I mean, somebody digging a hole in the ground and putting rooms in there, there's got to be a reason. I mean, people just, you can have the hermit wizard who doesn't want to be disturbed, but how many are there out there? I mean, you keep running into dungeons that these reclusive people built for a reason. You don't know what the reason is, but you got to clean it out. So that's why I say your dungeon should be logical and have a reason. It doesn't have to be a very sensible reason, but it has to have a reason to exist. I mean, they always talk about the ecology of dungeons and the monsters have to make sense. And I understand that, and I agree with it. But the dungeon has to make sense for being there. There's some game systems, like I think Earth Dawn, they gave a reason for dungeons being there. I can't remember what it is, but it seemed pretty logical. Every module I've seen usually has some kind of premise of why the dungeon is there. I tried to do that. And you know, when you got creatures like goblins and orcs and stuff, they don't like sunlight anyway, so of course they're going to dig down. But it's not going to be some fancy thing like a wizard would have. I like dwarven mines because they have a reason for being, and they can either be tapped out or go bad, which makes an instant dungeon thing right there. And things can move in. See, you can come up with a reason. But if you're just going to say, "Oh, this dungeon's outside," and everybody goes there to make their fortune, and you know that flies maybe twice, I think, with a group, and that's why I like to say my dungeons kind of make sense. They're either there for a reason, or they were part of the reason for it's part of the plot. Deluxe Tunnels and Trolls. I have a tomb of a great wizard whose body has been stolen by goblins who tunneled up from the Underdark and stole it. And so the adventurers got to go down there and get it. And, you know, it's basically cavern and rough hewn and stuff, but it's a dungeon, and there's a reason for being there, because this is where the goblins live, and they broke into this. So, you know, I like that kind of thing. You know, where some creatures who live underground or something like that, or they just break through something and just start causing havoc. That's a good reason. That's a good reason for a dungeon being there. So anyway, I've spouted enough about my dungeon, about dungeons, things like that, and blah 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 blah. So, excuse me. Let us end this for tonight. And if you have anything you want to say, give me some emails, send me questions, send me whatever at oldmangrognard@gmail.com, and I will answer them. See, I answered that. So until next time, bye-bye.